What's going on, my fellow stim addicts? My name is Easy and I have returned from illness. I have been absolutely cooked these past 2 weeks, but I've popped a ton of stims and I am finally feeling good enough to start making content again. So here we are. Let's cut to the chase. Arrowhead has confirmed that they are starting to take a look at Ragdolling in Helldivers 2. And honestly, it is about time. They've done some very small changes in the past, like adjusting hitboxes or making the blast radius of rockets smaller, but nothing has quite done the trick. These changes have been more like putting a band-aid on a broken bone. In my opinion, Ragdolling is still the #1 most frustrating mechanic in this game since launch. It feels like the most BS way to die, but here's the dilemma. While Ragdolling is incredibly tilting, I think it is an important mechanic when it comes to creating challenging and dynamic gameplay, and hot take incoming, I really don't mind getting ragdolled if it feels like it's deserved. If I'm out of position and playing like an idiot, sure, I deserve to be sent to Ragdoll Purgatory. And no, I'm not a masochist, I just want the game to be slightly challenging, and without Ragdolling, it would be far easier. So I think this issue is a lot more convoluted than just ragdolling bad, and it's pretty important that Arrowhead gets this mechanic right, because whether you like it or not, ragdolling is truly a staple in the gameplay of Helldivers 2. Hang on, before I get deep into my ragdoll rant, let's give you some context here. A few nights ago, our favorite community manager Twinbeard sent out a poll on the official Discord asking players to give them feedback about the current state of ragdolling. This is something Arrowhead frequently does, as believe it or not, they do take player feedback pretty seriously. And whenever a poll does go up on the Discord, it has historically been a pretty clear indicator that changes for a certain mechanic are coming. For example, months before the stim change happened, they asked players if Helldivers should be able to stim at full health. The poll was obviously overwhelmingly yes, because who doesn't want to juice up like a pro athlete, so they added the ability to stim at full health. The same happened with feedback on Orbitals vs Eagles, the Escalation of Freedom update, War Bonds, and some other things. So yeah, I think it's fair to say that this poll is an indicator that changes to ragdolling will be coming. A quick side note, can we acknowledge the fact that we're finally talking about the gameplay mechanics that matter and not just weapon balancing? Not that balancing didn't matter, because it surely did, but I think it says something that we're finally able to move past the whole balancing debate and focus our discussion on things that impact the actual core gameplay. Arrowhead can finally look to move forward and steadily improve the game over time, rather than just cleaning up the mistakes of the past. And the fact that they're now focused on ragdolling is indicative that we've finally made it to that stage, and that we'll be seeing real content and gameplay fixes in the near future. It feels like it's been a long journey to get to this point, but thankfully, I think it's fair to say that Helldivers is at the best point it's ever been from a gameplay perspective, and Arrowhead is ready to finally build on that. Anyway, back to the poll. At the time of recording this, it has been closed. It got just over 91,000 votes in 3 days, with the winning option being ragdolling is a bit too much at times, getting 39% of player votes. Other than that, votes are fairly even across the board, ranging from 8% to 15%, with our only outlier being for removing ragdolling entirely with just 3% of votes, which is good because, again, no matter how tilting getting ragdolled may be, ragdolling is an important mechanic and needs to stay in the game. I personally ended up voting with the majority for it's a bit too much at times, and while that is a true statement, it is very vague, right? And really, nothing on this poll does a good enough job at expressing my full views on ragdolling. Honestly, I was a bit disappointed because, at least in my opinion, the poll completely left out the biggest issue with ragdolling. But I don't blame Twinbeard or the other CMs for this. I totally understand that they are limited on what they can actually put on the poll because Discord has text and voting option limits, plus the fact that conversations around gameplay mechanics are far more convoluted than just one sentence can convey. Luckily, the devs are well aware of that, noting that they do plan to use player feedback outside of the polls to help them create solutions to ragdolling, which is partly why I wanted to make this video. Not like Arrowhead's gonna watch it, but I do want to get my opinions out there. So, aside from it's a bit too much at times, what are my opinions? Well, I did say this poll completely missed the one thing that I absolutely despise about ragdolling, and I hate to leave you hanging, but I'm going to, at least for now. I promise we'll get around to all my issues with ragdolling in just a minute here, but I think to truly understand and fully grasp my beliefs, it's important to give you my full opinions on the mechanic, so we need to start at the beginning. I did say ragdolling is an important mechanic, so why do I believe that? Even though it can be frustrating, why don't I just want ragdolling to be completely removed? For one, it keeps the gameplay dynamic and adds needed challenge. Like I said in the beginning of this video, when players make poor decisions on the battlefield, like mispositioning against heavy units or failing to dodge a volley of rockets, you should pay the price for that. Oftentimes, many of these attacks aren't enough to fully kill you, and it isn't enough consequence to just take some damage and be allowed to retreat. You made the mistake, and I think getting ragdolled and potentially killed for it because of the ragdoll is a fair punishment. On top of that, and potentially even more important, ragdolling simultaneously keeps the game realistic and adds to the over-the-top, chaotic, goofy charm that the entire game is known for. I know realism and goofiness are kinda opposites, but that doesn't make the statement false. On the realism side of things, I'm sorry, the game would just be stupid if your character didn't react to heavy attacks. Imagine a rocket hitting your face and all your character does is flinch. That would be the lamest and most unrealistic thing ever. It's as simple as that. And on the over-the-top chaotic goofiness side of things, you can't tell me that ragdolling isn't one of the funniest mechanics in the game. Helldivers 2 would not be Helldivers 2 if you didn't go flying 50 feet because you stood too close to a hell bomb. The game just simply wouldn't be the same game if you didn't get tossed around by heavy enemy attacks, and I think when done right, ragdolling can be more funny than it is actually frustrating. The unpredictability that comes with getting launched in the air contributes to the gameplay and the overall vibe of the game in ways that I think many people ignore because of their sheer hatred of getting ragdolled. Just remember when you first played Helldivers 2, you were definitely laughing every time you and your friends got blasted into the sky. But I don't blame you guys for getting frustrated when it happens now. I get mad too. After 7 months of experiencing bullshit deaths, there comes a point where ragdolling no longer makes me laugh and instead causes my controller to fly. So while I do like ragdolling as a whole and believe it is intrinsic to the experience that is Helldivers 2, its current implementation quite obviously has some flaws. If it didn't, Arrowhead wouldn't be looking to change the mechanic, and the majority of players wouldn't be voting that they want it to be tweaked. And you can't disagree with me here. If you do, you are literally arguing with democracy. The people have spoken, and if you want to disagree with democracy, well...
Your punishment is dishonorable death. Fire!
In my opinion, there are 3 major problems with the current ragdolling system, and I believe these are the main sources of frustration for many players. Again, these are just my opinions, but these are the things I'd most like to see changed or mitigated. The first and most talked about issue among the player base is stun locking. While I personally wouldn't say this is the biggest problem, stun locking or ragdoll juggling, whatever you want to call it, is easily one of the most frequently encountered ragdolling issues. If you don't know what I'm referencing when I say stun locking, it is basically getting ragdolled for long periods of time to the point where you are essentially stunned and unable to control your character, as you pray to Lady Liberty that you stop getting spammed by rocket devs. Despite what I said about stun locking being one of the most encountered issues, it is actually a lot more rare than you'd think, just more common than the other problems, if that makes sense. In most cases, you get blasted backwards by a volley of rockets, roll around on the floor for a second or two, then get back on your feet and have a chance to reposition. That is an example of good ragdolling. It leaves you vulnerable for a second where you get blasted backwards, but gives you a chance to recover because it didn't last forever. Where the stun locking issue comes into play is when you get blasted backwards in a similar situation, but then you get blown backwards again, and again, and again, and again, and again, and again. You get the point. This basically turns you into a spectator watching as the automatons slowly whittle down your helpless, flopping body. This very quickly turns into a very frustrating experience because anytime a player has no control over their character is just straight up not fun, and that's true for any game. So when this occurs over long periods of time, it just feels like total BS when you inevitably die to it. And this leads directly into the second major issue, which is that the splash damage on certain attacks is still broken and or too big. And I'm not talking about when a rocket hits the floor 5 feet away and still bounces you backwards, that's totally fine. What I am referencing are instances where a Helldiver takes all the right precautions, like taking cover behind a rock, only to be sent flying in the air when the rocket hits the other side of said rock. Despite being behind solid protection, the splash damage somehow goes through the object you are behind and ragdolls you anyway. How does that make sense? This is even more frustrating than normal ragdolls because you truly feel like you played the game correctly. You played smart, you took cover, but nah, it doesn't matter. Whatever the automatons just shot at you somehow splashed through the cover you were behind and got you ragdolled, then killed. And despite how frustrating that is, it's not even the most tilting thing. There is one final major issue that I've been talking about this whole time, and this one has literally made me Alt F4 the game on multiple occasions. It's environmental ragdolling. Again, I know the poll was limited, but they only featured 7 options, whereas I know for a fact Discord can feature up to 10. So it was a little disappointing to see that environmental ragdolling was left off the poll, but then I realized, really, nobody is talking about it. I see a few comments on Discord, but most people are still talking about stun locking. Again, I know, stun locking is a total pain in the ass, but at least with that, it's typically due to mispositioning. Whereas environmental ragdolling is straight up bullshit in whatever context you want to look at it. And since it seems like many people aren't talking about it, if you don't know exactly what I'm referencing, when I say environmental ragdolling, I'm talking about when the Helldiver randomly flops over because of objects in the environment. I'm sure we've all experienced it before, where you're running away from a charger, a bile titan, or a horde of hunters, are in the middle of clutching up, and just when you think you're about to make some awesome John Wick-esque play as you dive away from an attack, your character lands on a pebble on the floor, and somehow this is the thing that causes your character to ragdoll and you end up dying. This is definitely one of the more rare cases of ragdolling, but I swear to you, if I play a full bug operation, it occurs at least once per operation because I am constantly diving versus bugs. And it is by far the most tilting way I die in this game because it feels completely random. And it happens on more objects than just rocks on the floor. Pretty much anything that causes a surface to be uneven can and will ragdoll you. To further convince you that this is a problem, oftentimes environmental ragdolling is the reason that you end up getting stun locked because of an enemy attack. Let me paint a picture for you. You get hit by a rocket, go flying, but somehow end up rolling around and flopping on the floor for far longer than you normally should. That's because of the awful environment. Then you get hit by another rocket and end up getting stun locked. That situation wouldn't have happened if your character just stood up like he normally should have, but alas, there was something on the floor, so you just freak out on the ground like an idiot. Apparently, a pebble beats a Helldiver. So to recap, the 3 things I want to see addressed are 1. Stun locking, 2. Broken hitboxes for explosions and or cover not properly giving you cover, and 3. Environmental ragdolling. Now the real question is, how would I address these things? Well, let's start with stun locking. As I said earlier, I honestly don't think that this is that major of a problem because although it is the most common complaint, realistically this doesn't happen all too often if you play smart. So all that being said, I don't want Arrowhead to go overboard when trying to fix this issue. I've seen a lot of players suggest that they should allow you to stim while ragdolled or give a hard cap on ragdoll time. Both of these proposals sound good in theory and would probably fix the problem, but I actually don't agree with these takes and do not think they would be good solutions. For one, if you let players stim while ragdolled, then what is the point of ragdolling in the first place? The reason why ragdolling is punishing is because the enemy gets a free window to attack you while you can't respond. So if you could just stim through the damage, then ragdolling no longer matters in the context of making the game hard. I also don't think setting a hard cap is a good call either, because no matter how long the hard cap is, what happens after? You get immunity from future ragdolling and stand up? That would be ridiculous. Imagine getting smacked with a volley of rockets to the face, but since you've hit the cap, you're immune and your character has no reaction to it. It simply just wouldn't look right for a heavy attack to land and your Helldiver just shrugging it off. Instead, I think they can keep the solution here simple. Very simple, there's no reason to overthink it. All Arrowhead needs to do is change the default Helldiver position after getting ragdolled. Stop forcing us to stand up after getting ragdolled. Just keep us prone, and I think this solves almost all of our issues. Most of the time, it's not even attacks during the ragdoll that keep you stun locked. It's the fact that after the ragdoll, you get forced into a standing up animation, which leaves you vulnerable to getting ragdolled again, and oftentimes that exact thing happens. If you allow the Helldiver to stay prone and leave it up to the player to stand ourselves back up, this not only prevents us from getting locked in that stupid standing up animation, but it also prevents more instances of ragdolling by keeping us low to the floor to dodge attacks, and gives us control of our character faster, which in turn adds more skill to the game, as it will now be up to the player to make the choice of when they want to get up and run versus stay prone on the floor. However, proning doesn't fix the issue of the broken hitboxes where cover doesn't even work, and the environmental ragdolling problem. My simple solution to both of these things is that they just need to be completely removed, period. I don't know what causes these, and I don't know what changes need to be made in order to make this a reality, but I do not want to be getting ragdolled when sitting behind cover, nor do I want to get ragdolled because I dove onto a rock. To clarify, I am totally okay if I get ragdolled because I dive from a tall building or jump down a steep hill. Those are fine because I am making the conscious choice to jump off this building knowing full well I'm gonna end up on my ass. But when I get ragdolled because my diver trips on a tiny rock on the floor, I just don't want this to ever happen. It isn't fun, it isn't funny, and 99% of the time, it isn't even preventable because you typically can't even see the tiny ass rock on the floor, and by the time you do, you've already tripped on it and are dead. If anything, I think environmental ragdolling makes the game less skilled and more reliant on RNG factors, which isn't a direction I want any game to go. Alright, to recap here, if I was Arrowhead, I would do 3 things. 1. Fix stun locking by defaulting the Helldiver to prone after getting ragdolled. 2. Fix the knockback effect and properly allow all objects in the world to stop it from hitting the player so we don't get ragdolled from behind cover. And 3. Find a way to remove environmental ragdolling entirely. I do not want to see this in the game. As a reminder, this video has been entirely my opinion, and when it comes to things like this, it's totally normal for every player to have a different opinion and reaction. There are rightfully going to be some people out there that think environmental ragdolling isn't a problem, or that they want to see a hard cap on ragdolling. And to those people I say, it's totally okay. We are all about democracy here. We need to vote with our voices. In the end, I hope Arrowhead does the things that will make their game better. I don't care what those things are, as long as the game ends up better, I'm happy. I know for a fact that you can't please everyone, so I'm not going to be mad when they likely don't implement the exact changes that I'm looking for. I am simply just happy that they're expressing their want for player feedback, and I'm hoping that we're going to get some great changes in the future. Speaking of opinions, I do want to hear yours. Drop your thoughts in the comments and make sure to hit that sub button on your way out. I've got a lot more Helldivers content on the way. Again, I apologize for being MIA for 2 weeks. I came down with something and really just didn't want to do anything but sit in bed, but I promise I'm back now and will be posting a few times per week. So yeah, drop a sub if you don't want to miss any content like this. My name has been Easy, and I appreciate you. Thank you for watching till the end. Take care of yourself. See ya!